If you had a weekend like mine, it involved shoveling some snow and applying some de-icer. So I definitely want to stress the main point. We need to ensure our safe travel, keep those walkways clean, roads ice-free as possible. I know we are talking a little bit about how to protect our plants, but we can replace the plants. We can't replace you. So if you're worried about your plants, take your safety and concern first. So several different methods, shovel, snow blowers, plows, but the one I'm going to focus on now is one of the most common that we use are our de-icers. So looking into when does that injury actually occur? Our late winter, early spring applications, this is going to be causing the most damage. Early winter, we're probably going to have a couple more snow showers and ice events. So really applying right now is not going to be the issue. Usually early spring, these plants are going to start waking up and taking up all that water. So that's really when those salts are going to become an issue, is later on. So little disclaimer, I'm not endorsing any specific products. Really, this is just to show you a couple brands and a couple things that you may have been applying over the week. So most of our icers come in a liquid or a granular form. And most common you're going to have is sodium chloride, or NaCl, or we call it rock salt, table salt. Main advantage, this stuff is really effective and very, very low cost and readily available. The main disadvantage is all the corrosive properties of these salts. Looking at the environmental, the damage to your vehicles, I know kind of northern Missouri, you do have that corrosion on your vehicles and the undercarriage that can actually cause quite a bit of issue. And it can also cause concrete damage. And looking at just regular NaCl, that blend, it comes to a temperature point where it becomes ineffective. So some of our other products may be a quick ice melt. I know the other one has a Roadrunner on it. So those actually come in with different blends of products. So we're going to look at all of your sodium chloride, calcium chloride, all your chlorides, those compounds are going to have that corrosive tendencies, and leaching and having residues like that white chalky residue that I'm mopping up after my kids when they come into the house. So cleanup, it can be easy. So handling and storage is fairly simple, just kind of keeping it clean and dry. So the ease of use of these salts are really why these products are more prominent than some of our other alternatives. Now, looking down at potassium acetate, this is an alternative, so it's effective to negative 25 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is also biodegradable and safe for plants and soils, and we don't have that corrosion factor that we have with all of our other chlorides. The disadvantage is extremely expensive. Usually it only comes in a liquid form and isn't readily available. You're not going to be able to go down to your local hardware store and pick it up. So urea and nitrogen, also kind of want to point out, these are commonly used as our fertilizers. So some of these compounds do tend to have some corrosive properties or a high ammonia content, nitrogen runoff. That can be a problem, especially with our waterways, with leaching. And again, they are going to be more expensive than the alternative. Continuing, we have a couple other products, calcium, magnesium acetate. Again, with these, we have different levels of effectiveness, different advantages and disadvantages. I also want to kind of draw your attention to some of our agricultural byproducts. We usually use this as a mix or a blend with our other chlorides. So this helps reduce that corrosiveness when we have that blend. So it's a little easier on the plants and the soil. Most of them are biodegradable, especially if we mix them maybe with a urea or some type of other alternative fertilizer. And again, disadvantage, expense is always a main factor. Sometimes they may only come in a liquid form, a specific form. And then last, we do have abrasive materials, sand or kitty litter. Advantages, again, low cost, but they're more for that traction factor instead of actually melting that ice. So most of all of these salts work due to their freezing point of depression. And even our calcium chloride, that actually gives off a little heat when mixed with our water. So we have that nice melting effect. All right, I know this is more for high tunnel production, but I did want to throw it in there because it does relate to our damage. So on the soil side, excess sodium, excess salt actually can alter our soil structure. We can have reduced infiltration, reduced soil aeration, And all of these factors may actually lead to compaction and then eventually erosion and then water runoff. So figure 3 is a photo of a high tunnel that has excess salt accumulation from fertilizers. Figure 4 is just looking at the soluble salt damage to these peppers in a high tunnel. So kind of give you an idea where else you may see this salt damage, not just on your landscape plants, that in the high tunnel, that is a problem as well. On the plant side, with these excess salts, it's really going to interfere with the process of photosynthesis. When those plants start taking up that water, they're going to fight with those osmotic potentials, and those water potentials fight with getting that water. It can also interfere with respiration and transpiration within the plant. So on our chloride ions, these can actually injure our tissues. So they can also, just like our salts, disrupt that water intake and can cause nutritional imbalances of our magnesium and our potassium. So looking at diagnosing and testing, usually we're going to be doing this as a foliar analysis or a soil salt test early spring. We want to catch it before those spring rains because that rain is just going to leach all those salts away. So the timing on that may be troublesome, beating the rain. Leaf and stem tissue, you want to look at the growing season for the chloride content. All right, so a couple indications of the salt spray injury. Usually we have the spray when we're going down the highway and the tire tracks are kicking up all that, and it's kind of going on the sides of our trees. So the injury is going to be closer to the side of the application. Downwind, those areas are going to be a little bit more affected. Can occur as far as 60 feet. And we want to look also about our sensitive plants. Some of our sensitive species can be affected 1,000 feet away from the area of application. And in the next slide, I have a photo that you'll see the damage of where the snow covered it, or there was a barrier, and then the bottom is unaffected and the top is affected. So different species are going to have different tolerances. So that's kind of on the salt spray injury side. On the soil, usually we're going to have more localized 30 feet of that application, and we're going to see more injury in those areas that water pools or the water runoff from the highway. So that's, if we have any plants planted there, that's where we're going to start seeing those damages. So a couple of photos for our evergreens and kind of the symptoms that we're going to be seeing. So early spring, we're going to see bud break, stunted vigor and growth. We may have reduced flowering, or we can also have dieback. And then we have that new growth coming up right behind it. And it's going to cause this witch's broom type growth here in the bottom photo. And with our deciduous trees, we're going to see a wilting. When we get that dry, hot weather in the springtime, late summer, we're going to see that kind of a wilting effect because of those residual salts in the soil. So on our evergreens, I really like this photo as an example. This is where the snow was covering the bottom half of our tree here. And then the top half, as you can see, it's all brown. The browning starts from the tip of those needles and goes all the way. It's eventually going to work its way down and kill it completely. So we had some protection with that snow, but you can see that injury on the top there. Moving on to how do we prevent this? There's several different methods to look at preventing damage. Again, I want to stress, we can replace the tree, we can't replace you. So if you need a salt, go ahead and do so. But if you do know that you're going to be planting in an area that's going to have lots of applications, we do have some plant tolerant species, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And we can also plant on berms or mounted raised beds. So this is going to get those roots up out of that soil, and it's going to help with the runoff issue. If it's a low-lying area, it's going to bring that soil up so we don't have issues with that water runoff and collection with that salts. We can also use physical barriers. So maybe a fence, plastic, or burlap can help kind of shield those trees. And when we're out shoveling snow, just kind of be aware of where you're putting the salt-treated snow. Make sure you're putting in a different area that's not in that plant root zone. And before spring and before bud break, Make sure to rinse off those plants and water them really, really heavy to kind of flush all those excess salts out of the root zone and off the leaves. And if we do run into issues, if we do have a soil analysis, we can apply gypsum or CSA SO4 to those heavy clay soils. This is going to help with those sodium ions and those calcium ions. Again, but that's going to be at the recommendation of your soil test. And looking at the sensitive plants, if you do really want a sensitive plant in that application area, plant it as far away as you can. All right, so this next slide is some of the salt-tolerant varieties for Missouri. So I have some trees and shrubs and evergreens. Missouri Botanical Garden has a really great list on all these different tree species and shrubs available for you.